Well, hello, hello. Welcome to the Multifamily Weekend Update. I'm Eric Sharp.
Hi, Eric. I'm Justin.
I got
Nice
my
to see ya.
co-host who's not in Atlanta today.
No, I'm in lovely Utah, so it's like 10:30 here. I just decided I'd hang out west, just ready for Apartmentalize.
You're just getting in the zone.
I'm just
Yeah.
That's how excited I am. Yeah, actually, I just wanted to see Zion National Park, so that's what I'll be doing.
I do know it's very pretty. I have yet to really experience Utah, one of the few places I have not been in the United States.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. I've been to other parts, but not this little nook. So I'm excited.
Well, we got a whole lot to cover today on episode 40, right before Apartmentalize.
We do. There's been lots of news, right? We should dig into it.
Yeah, let's dig into it here. We've got. Well, you're right next to Colorado, right? You're touching.
Not too far. I could drive there.
Slapping hands. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? The Colorado governor surprisingly vetoed down. Well, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but he vetoed down House Bill 1004, which ultimately stopped the potential of restricting rent setting software like RealPage.
Yeah.
So this is pretty big news.
I think it's slightly surprising based on some articles, right? He's a Democratic governor, so you may not think that that's perhaps a traditional move in the sense of fair housing, but he obviously knows what he's talking about. I mean, there's a lot of industry leaders that kind of commented on it, what they think about it. And we actually have one with us today, right? We could bring our guest on. We should kind of think what they think about this.
Why not? Why don't we go ahead and kick it off early here? We're going to bring...
let's do it.
Guillermo on here.
Hey guys, love the reveal.
I
feel like I'm the river card in a Hold'em game.
Yeah, nice to have you. Thanks for
likewise.
joining.
Hey, no, it's thrilled to be here, gentlemen, and love having the chat about this stuff. This Colorado governor is pretty interesting. I mean, especially if you dig in and double click on his background.
Yeah.
Like he's a tech guy, right? Digital Mountain Arts. Do you remember selling electronic greeting cards? That was his business, right? And a couple other after that. He's a tech guy. So it doesn't, while he is Democratic, it doesn't fall too far. And I mean, and a Colorado Democrat is different than a Massachusetts Democrat.
Yes.
Right.
100%.
And so
100%.
I would say that it doesn't seem too far out of character at all to throw that out.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think it's like sort of how that lands nationally that maybe caught people's attention and like, but I think you're totally right. Obviously, this is good news for a lot of folks. It's a strong sign, especially after, the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California kind of put some stringent laws in place recently. So that's kind of a positive. There's other like news, isn't there? Like, don't you like some other governmental related news that have been besides that's a little more East Coast?
Which one? You want me to bring up the Florida one?
Yeah.
You've got hot takes. We have our first guest who brought news to us, and I would like to start this trend.
I think this is guys, this is an interesting story. We have seen this litigation on the sales side in about in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's about chatbots and AI. So hey, surprise, it's for NAA. I want to talk about chatbots and AI. So what's interesting is that we're finally seeing, as what we've seen in the past, and you may have caught it in the news, a chatbot sold a truck for less than half. Air Canada, people were able to book flights for $1 because they tricked the chatbot. And that's being solved in terms of the delivery of it. But what I find interesting is that a federal judge in Florida has allowed a case to proceed against Google and Character AI for giving advice to a user that caused harm to that user. And what's interesting, and I was chatting with some insurance companies about this the last couple of days, is the conversation of where is liability held. Now, we have a chatbot. So I am pro chatbot. I think it's really important for the resident experiences that we deploy these things. But what is now interesting is to understand the liability that and where that rests with respect to advice that's given. And so the Florida judge there language was that a chatbot is equivalent to a frontline employee. And so liability is held at those that employ. It is not the chatbot company, but it is those that hired the chatbot as it represents a frontline employee, which is, for the first time in a long time, that just kind of makes common sense. And so,
makes sense to me too.
When you look at the liability of using a chatbot, where does it reside? In the management or the ownership side? So if I've got an owner who owns a building and I've employed a manager who then is employing a chatbot, where does agency land? And this is for conversation, right? Like the agency of who's giving advice. If the owner is employing a manager and the manager is employing a chatbot, it could be a case of who's got the better insurance policy. It could be the case of who's got more money, but ultimately there's going to be a lawsuit. And when I was talking to some insurance folks, what they're interested in is, okay, let's say, for example, basic scenario, I've got a GFCI in my bathroom, it pops, and the chatbot gives you advice to find the reset button and reset it, right? Without considering why the GFCI tripped to begin with. It just says, click the red button, click the black button, you're good to go. But then all of a sudden that creates a smoky fire or whatever, or there's a spark and damage to the resident. And so chatting with insurance companies, this is like literally coffee chat. So this is not binding by any means, but worth discovering if you have a chatbot and talking to your provider, is that the insurance policy would not cover the damage, may not cover the damage, the insurable damage for that particular event. And so do you know the advice that your chatbot's giving? And do you know how that advice is being received by the resident? Especially, and this is the conversation that was kind of, we double clicked on, the source of the event is given by the resident. So the description of the problem comes from the resident. And then the chatbot responds. It seeks to clarify and it responds and offers advice. And I don't have a solid answer on this. So it's subject to, I mean, I hope at NAA, it creates a lot of conversations around a bar, because this is the first time we've seen litigation and liability apply to advice given versus revenue given. And we know that chatbots first came out on the resident side of things. But for example, Expedia, it booked some plane tickets the wrong way. It's chatbot. It made it clear. It made it true. And the liability limitation was to that flight. So you're talking like $1,000, right? Not even worth the lawsuit. If you're talking about a fire in a building or water in a building, there's a lot of damage. So it's kind of
loss of life.
So if you think about it a little bit, you're like, oh, geez, this could be a bit of a tapeworm. So I'll throw that out there for your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea that your chatbot is really an extension of the business, right? It's like an employee, similar to if you had a staff member or, maintenance technician say, oh yeah, if this ever happens again, just, hit the red button. Well, in the mind of the maintenance technician who's going in there, they're thinking this is tripping because, their hair dryer is just hitting that.
There's moisture in the air. They don't know.
Whatever. It's hitting it. But meanwhile, there may be something unbeknownst to them that is also occurring.
And for the maintenance tech,
100%.
To engage, a service request has been raised. But for a chatbot, that's 24/7. No service request has been raised.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it reminds me of the just this human technology kind of struggle. Like the easiest story, if there's any Office fans out there, that back old tech, right? Michael Scott has a GPS in his car. And he is driving. It says, turn right on this street. Dwight says, no, there's a lake right there. Mike's like, well, technology, drives right into the lake. Now, Michael Scott is at fault in this scenario, but that's, I think, and it's exaggerated, but I think that's the thing is if you're using tech, you have to be responsible both on the user. I mean, there's some a little bit, the resident has something to say. Obviously, they're less liable because they're not going to know.
And they have less money.
That has to be an
awareness.
And they have less money. Exactly. 100%. Yeah.
Right. So that's the part that I think is really, I hope it's, I'm sure not a lot of people are talking. I came across the Newswire. We chose to write about it a little bit just to see if have we really thought through the liability of what that chatbot is offering for advice? And do you have control over what that advice is? And so it's if you put the mindset, I had never really thought of it, and the mindset of it replaces it. Obviously, when we sell these things, the ROI is related to FTE optimization, but then the liability of it all doesn't necessarily come into consideration in a lot of these conversations.
Yeah, that's a very, very good call out, because we don't talk about it very, very often, at least not in this space yet.
But it's rolling hard,
Yeah.
like it's happening very fast. So, and I'll leave that. I mean,
Yeah.
and then the leasing side of things. Okay, so if a leasing chatbot offers up a unit for $1, okay, that sucks. Maybe I lost $24,000. But if I flooded a building and then my insurance provider now declines my claim, or they come back to you for a claim that was submitted because it's all recorded in a chat log, or maybe the legal.
Right.
Anyways, I'd leave that out there as a conversation for people to chat about it in AA, because I'd be curious.
Yeah, and you've also like ignited the already overworked risk folks that are
Sure.
dealing with fraud with a whole other kind of problems, which is just malfunctioning AI or not guardrailed in AI that could lead to these like high risk.
Well, and it's a best intentions thing too. Like best intentions is to make it easier for the resident, but we don't have a full scope in the scenario that's being held. And what was interesting is it also kind of peels back a little bit to advice that's given, generally speaking. So chatting with folks this past week, I mean, I hear about maintenance techs that a service request is coming in and they're giving advice while they're driving, right? Well, should you be doing that? Should you be doing that while you're driving? And obviously that's representative of something else that's happening. But just thinking about how we're offering and troubleshooting to try and solve the problems that maintenance is pulling on with respect to, can you solve a ticket faster? The renewal conversation, let's kind of make my residents happier. How can I be more responsive? Like there's a lot of tugs that are competing for the ability in a world where you've got less techs, you've got more service requests, and if you're growing, you're getting more units to manage. And how are you going to find these people to staff these buildings? So what's complicated about it is it makes sense. That's the part that's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I like your take on this. I'm glad that you're following it, and I know it affects you and what you're up to. I mean, what else? Tell us what else is kind of going on in your mind going into Apartmentalize, and I mean, we're halfway through the year. I mean, at this point, we're halfway through the year.
Yeah. So Stephanie, that's out there, look up Reuters and character.ai and Florida lawsuit, federal judge, and we can put it in the in the show notes, I guess, for follow up.
Yeah.
I think Apartmentalize is interesting this year. We really are at an apex, right, of the old way of doing things, the new way of doing things, and this lawsuit's timely for a conversation. And I really am excited about what we're going to see, because the conversations that we've had in the last, like, if I look at the arc of conversations that we've had in the market for the last 8 years, there really has been a convergence of, okay, we're talking about ROI, we're talking about saving money, but we're starting now to talk about, can we even get the job done? And this is the maintenance side specifically. So everyone, that's our lens, but like, there are no people, right? Yes, Stephanie, it's about the one about the kid. There are no people. And since we don't have the people to do things, we're forced in situations of doing things differently. We could have suffered through not being able to, not being able to be able to absorb lower NOIs or absorb more expense. But now we're at a case now we actually don't have the people to do the work. And that's really becoming a challenge, is that we're being pressured to do more with less. We have more with less just because of the standard. We're being pressured to do, but we just don't have the people. And so I think that's an interesting conversation to talk about, is that you look at that talent cliff that's out there, and it really is like 52 in a maintenance tech perspective. So you got this, and we had a panel on last Friday talking about resident experience or centralized maintenance. Like, choose one, and then question mark. Like, do you have to do that? Or can we think about a new way to solve that problem so that we're not necessarily bound by the constraints of the old way of doing things? And I think that I hope to hear at NAA this week a lot of realization that the old pencil is outdated. It's like a fax machine. And then if you're looking at 1 to 100, like, it's just, you're going to get laughed out of the room because it just doesn't even work anymore. It doesn't even apply. And so, like, thinking about the underwriting of some of these buildings or some of these properties with respect to how they're being managed, it happened so fast, but it was happening for so long. And that's the part that's realized that all that tug is happening all at once. And I think the big part about it is just the fact there's so much supply coming online. We got like 500,000 units coming online this year. And so you really are trying to compete with a new building, and we've got to staff that building with people. And where's that staff going to come from? So let's say 500,000, let's say 500 more techs got to come online, and they're not there. There's no buildings that actually have full, very rarely do you have a fully staffed up building. And so just the rules have completely changed, but they happened quite slowly, but the flip happened very quickly. And so I hope that we hear a lot of those conversations about what are you doing? How are you going to do it? What are you thinking about it? And hear a lot of collisions in terms of conversations around how are we going to ultimately create a model that supports that's a realistic plan. I'll put a realistic plan to keep residents happy, protect our assets, and do it in a way that the constraints are now such that you really should be modeling 1 to 150, 1 to 200. That should be your model. And how does that apply?
When I think something you talk about, things are changing, right? There are certain things right now in our industry that are pushing this change. And a lot of it comes from resident expectations. I think about that a lot. How we move throughout our world, when we decide to move versus when we decide to stay. And I think it was maybe a week or two ago when we talked about how Landing, their domain name's Hello Landing, I think, but they ended up raising something like how many? 80 million, 180 million, something like that.
A lot,
huge amount of money. And basically, what I believe is that what's happening there is there's bigger bets being placed on residents preferring to be able to move around their city, to be able to move around their region without being punished for it. So we're going to be seeing more of like a hotelification of multifamily. Hospitality has been creeping in little by little. We've been learning as much as we can, but ultimately it's these Class A properties that benefit the most from this. Class B is still trying to play catch up there just because, the dollars are not there, right? Mm-hmm. But I think of like big factors like that when you have this emerging generation of people who want remote jobs, mm-hmm. but who don't want to work necessarily in their home all day. And they want to work in an environment that's like fun and freeing. And, but I don't want to be in Florida for summer. I want to move somewhere else. Can I sublease my place? Oh, no, you won't let me. Okay, well, then I want to pick up my stuff and move. And, you're either going to lose out and you're going to have a turn to do, right? You're going to try to chase me for money, or you just say, hey, that's cool. Like $500 fee. Go ahead and go to a sister property up north in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. Whenever you want to move back, that's cool. We'll try to see if your place is available, but if not, we can get you into another place. I think that's going to happen more in our industry, but to that point, you're going to see more turns. You're going to see, it's just going to accelerate the change.
But imagine just using that scenario. Imagine that, you know what, we'll move you, like no fee. Mm-hmm. Hey, if you want to go to our spot in Massachusetts, we'll move you. Can you imagine that offer? What?
That'd be incredible. And I think there are a certain group of people, right? Certain income bracket, that would be willing to pay for that. Mm-hmm. We talk about snowbirds mm-hmm. being, retirees. Well, guess what? There's a lot of young folks who want that flexibility to be able to move up, down, left, right.
Right. And they will pay for that monthly, 12 months a year if they have that flexibility.
To me, this makes renting more advantageous than owning a home. Truly.
Well, owning a home is already a bad deal, right? You do it for there's a lot. Currently right now, it's hard to justify particularly if you put the opportunity cost of a down payment into the math and the maintenance of a home. Like mm-hmm. it's a bad deal.
Oh, the first 5 to 10 years are just brutal for owning a home. Yeah.
So, and then, I think that what you bring up there, Eric, is the resident has a vote in this conversation now more so than ever before. And by the way, they also have a tendency to be more mobile than ever before. And so mobility, I don't think we really ever thought about that before in this industry. Like they kind of people take their job, but now with gig, I certainly don't think that when people are looking at the impact of the gig economy or being able to work anywhere, that it was thought through in terms of what this impacts on the leases. But I think you bring up a good point,
Mhm.
right? Mobility of the renter having a vote, the hotelification of everything. And I think what's interesting, you look at like hoteling or hospitality and like the motivations, because the stay is such a small little, let's call it 3 days. And I'm guessing that the average stay is 3 days. And that if that average stay is 3 days and you're turning that over all the time, you have such a motivation to get, and what is it? If you want to be a Bonvoy Platinum, it's 50 stays in a year. That means like 50 leases you signed, right? Micro leases that you signed that year. Of course, that customer is a prospect, is someone you want to go for. And whereas you've got one stay in a lease, and I hope everyone's following the analog, it's not really too much of a stretch, but now that I'm choosing to move and flip around, it's interesting because it's changed. The power in the resident is really, and now with all the supply coming online, and then the additional pressure of interest, property taxes, and insurance, like maybe you don't want to live in Florida in the fall. Kind of gets wet.
This is true. And shout out to Stephen Winsby for, yes, it was 180 million.
Yeah.
That,
that clarified it. Yeah.
That.
So we'll see you at NAA next week. And I think, Eric, we found either a co-host, but we should have you back. If I'm gone or you're gone, Eric, we can slide.
Guillermo needs to change his name to Justin, though. There's kind of a
that's the rule.
That's the rule.
It'll be the Spanish version.
There you go.
Justin. Yeah, I was gonna say there's not for the Jota. Yeah.
That was my Spanish teacher. That's what she called me, Justine. So tell us where we can find you at NAA and beyond.
I'm gonna be around NAA because there's another conference going on as well. So I'm bouncing back and forth between Customer Contact Center Week and NAA. So shoot me a note on LinkedIn. I'm going to be there Wednesday, Thursday, and around the conference. I won't have a badge, but I'll be nearby at the various venues. But I'm always open for a conversation, a happy hour, coffee. 8 till the midnight. I'll be around, that's for sure. I've got an event. There's an event Wednesday night that's Tuesday night put together by Tony Souza. And then there's an event going on, I think Wednesday night. There's a maintenance appreciation happy hour. I don't know what's happening Thursday. I've got an early flight Friday, but that's my plan.
Thursday's I think Thursday's the big show, which most people tend to not do events to collide with that. But I mean, as we know,
Thursday, I think I was planning to watch the hockey game.
There you go. All right. Well, awesome. We'll see you next week. We'll see you in Vegas, and
I look forward to seeing you both. Take care. Cheers. Have a great weekend, both. Cheers.
Thanks, Guillermo.
Yeah.
Bye.
So we'll be at NAA. People have been talking about NAA. We're still talking about emails.
This is true. Yeah, our buddy Tony. Emails. Speaking of Tony, man, he was clapping back on these emails, basically saying, look, he gets it. There's 1,000 task list item things to do for marketing teams, sales teams, and sometimes scrubbing the list extremely well is not easy. In every company, every supplier has their own version of a list that they want to scrub. And I've been through this tons of times. So he said, look, give us some grace. Yes.
Yeah, grace. And grace both ways, also just the responsibility that both sides of the coin have, right? Like if you do schedule meetings, show up to those meetings, or cancel if you have to cancel, like tell people, like the respect for both, I think, was part of the call out, which was very popular. I mean, a lot of different people chimed in, agreed, shared, reposted, all of that stuff. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to respect each other's time and energy. And, at the end of the day, look, if it's something you're not interested in, or it's really not good for your company and organization, you're just doing it out of obligation, tell someone, tell them that, give them a chance to, convince you otherwise ultimately. But at the end of the day, no one needs to waste a 30-minute demo or an hour-long demo time or getting prepped for it if you're just not going to show up to the meeting. And I've done that once or twice in my life for sure. I've definitely.
It does, and certain things happen. I think it's just that awareness. But Stephanie Oler went even further, and she kind of called out. Yes, exactly. Oh, but her emails. She called out the whole system, right? And Eric, you and I know about this, which is like a lot of the systems, like the metrics, like how many touch points, what are the cadences, all of that kind of stuff. Like that's the way that we often are told to do SaaS sales. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the people that are doing it are just trying to carry out the job that they've done.
Yeah, and the problem is it works, and it's annoying. The reason why we keep doing it, I say we marketers in general, not speaking for all marketers out there. There's some crappy ones for sure, but at the end of the day, it's a numbers game for us, right? I mean, if we send out 1,000 emails, we're only going to get 2 responses. We send out another email blast, we'll get 1 or 2 more responses, right? And it's just like every time we keep changing the message, trying to figure out what's going to work for you. We're basically just knocking on doors until we find one that's, Jimmy's open. And the problem is it works. Sometimes you catch people at the right time, right? Where they're just really experiencing that pain point. They just got off of an all hands meeting with the team and the boss says, we need to find a way to do X. And all of a sudden you get that email that says, hey, are you struggling with this? We can solve for X. And then you're booking that demo, right? And it works. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end, the supplier goes, yes, we got a lead. Email works. Let's keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it does work. There are ways to hone it down. And I would say that if you've been doing this a long time, right, people in the industry, companies. So your particular messaging, and if you're like, whether you're in leadership or however, you should start reaching out to folks as you know them. I get a lot of emails from property management software asking me if I want to like look at my portfolio of real estate, and to my property management software email address. So it's just that being mindful, right?
Yeah. This is true. All right, we got to keep kicking here.
We're doing it. Merger.
Yeah, there's a merger announcement. Alfred and Cortera merged their multifamily operations. Essentially, this is RKW Residential and Cortera Living have entered the merger agreement. The two represent the property management arms of Alfred and Cortera. But this is a pretty big deal. Right. 52,000 units across the nation, and ultimately about $20 billion in assets. Pretty big number.
Yeah, pretty big number. Yeah. So, what else was flagged this week?
Oh, this is one of my favorite ones, of course. My good friend Remen. I have seen this chart so many times, and we all know that Yardy has been the one wearing the big pants. Well, guess what? MRI threw a little curveball, a little plot twist, and Ben Burke from MRI reached out and updated Remen with some new data, basically stating that there's about 15.6 million residential multifamily units, which puts them ahead of Yardy.
Yeah, globally that is true. In the U.S. we're kind of in the middle there, but I think that's why the marketing team is leaning at MRI. I can give it on to PropTech's multifamily's best kept secret. They've sort of grown quietly globally over the last 8 years. I mean, I've only been here 3 years, and the amount of footprint and what they do beyond commercial, is kind of crazy.
Yeah. And to the point of someone even commented, I think on Remen's post stating like, I don't even know who uses MRI, and it's one of these things where it's like, well, yeah, you're right. In your region, MRI may not be dominant, but they are making progress. And this chart absolutely demonstrates that. Now, don't forget, this is as of June 2025. It's your core PMS, right?
It's just the core. So it's none of the point solution products, which is also a huge footprint. But yeah, it's just the core solution there.
And this includes non-US, right? So I'm curious to see these numbers update. Within a matter of probably the next month or two. I'm sure there's some folks who'd love to update Remen's chart here, but this is a very, very interesting revelation.
Yeah. And I'll see you next week, right, sir?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, I just read the Revise, because I totally don't read email during this broadcast. I just read the email from Revise talking about the Podcast-Palooza kicking off on Tuesday night. It goes from about 8 to 11, and they quote say it's bringing the industry's loudest voices into one room. What could possibly go wrong, Justin? Are we part of that? The loudest voices?
No, I'd say we amplify others' voices, maybe, right?
I like that.
And people have to tell you to speak up anyway.
This is true. Yeah. Sometimes I have to tweak my microphone up because I turn it down because I'm so loud.
Yeah. So that's Tuesday night. If you don't have anything to do and you're an owner operator, there are a few spots left. It's at the Venetian. There's some great debates. There's actually too much content to kind of throw in a kind of blur, but it's debating about AI, the future of the industry. There's live mini podcasts being recorded, libations, food, a little fun too. It should be a good time.
That's right. Well, cheers, everyone. Good luck and safe travels to NAA. And we'll see you possibly live from NAA next week.
Yes.
Maybe.